Mr. Fishkin, thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Let's start with something that you said in a conference recently. You said that democracy all over the world is under threat. Why is it under threat?
Well, it seems to produce deadlock and division, and it's disconnected from its central idea, the central idea being some connection between the will of the people and what's actually done. And the will of the people is because of political competition and the political interests, the very natural and understandable interests of different political actors and parties to win elections and to influence, if not manipulate, public opinion to support their policies. Political actors do not do anything to foster the public will formation, the will of the people being formed when people can understand, can focus on the issues, understand them, weigh competing arguments. I call that deliberation. And that's the missing ingredient. People thinking about the issues after they've heard both sides or the competing sides, after they've focused on it and become informed. Why should they? Even in normal circumstances, even in good circumstances, if I have one vote in millions, why should I pay a lot of attention? Social scientists have studied this, and they call it rational ignorance. It's rational to be ignorant because it's rational to spend my time on the things where I can have an effect, my family, my job, etc. But all citizens are in that position, and therefore the collective group of citizens are not really focused on what needs to be done. Now, if there's nothing important that needs to be done, it doesn't matter. But if there are real challenges, then it's important to somehow get the will of the people on the issues that really matter. And that's what the deliberative polling process adds to the mix. It's not meant to replace the rest of our democratic institutions, but add to it, supplement it with something, with that missing magic ingredient, the will of the people when they've focused on the issue and they've become more informed. So my research question is a very odd research question. It's what would the people think under good conditions for thinking about it. And it turns out to have surprising results and to be eminently practical.
That's why you say that, and it's the name of your last book, no? Democracy when the people are thinking, no?
Yeah, are thinking, yes. Yeah. Exactly. And now, some of my colleagues around the world think that this is all a fool's errand because they think the people are not capable of governing themselves, and the people are not capable of thinking about complicated issues. I say that's incorrect. I say that we have experience now in 30 countries where we have shown that when the people focus on issues, even complex ones, if they're given the information, if every effort is made to engage them with the competing sides of some important policy, they rise to the occasion, provided that they think their voice matters. That's the magic ingredient that has to be added. They will focus on the issue and do all the hard work if they think their voice matters. If they think it doesn't, then they won't pay much attention and they won't become informed, and they are easy for political actors to manipulate.
And that kind of deliberation can become a decision formation process?
Yes, or an input, or a part of a stage in major processes. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you many examples around the world.
Mm-hmm. Tell me one of those examples.
Well, okay, you have to distinguish the examples where the project was done by civil society, mm-hmm. and then it had an effect, and then those projects were the project where it was done in part with the active cooperation of the government. Mm-hmm. Okay, first the civil society one. A few years ago, Japan was about to privatize its pension system. And in fact, the Chilean case was used as a model because Japan is becoming very old, and therefore the pay-as-you-go system was under strain because the number of young people paying in was getting less in compared to the number of old people who were increasing who would receive benefits. So this was a major problem. So as the government was preparing to privatize, they did polling, and the polling showed that about 70% of the public supported the reform. So they were about to go ahead. But we had done several Japanese deliberative polls with our colleagues at Keio University in Tokyo, and they got a grant and got the money for a national deliberative poll, and they got the support of NHK, the television broadcaster, and Asahi Shimbun, which is proud to call itself the New York Times of Japan, a very important newspaper there, and who publicized the results. And the support for the privatized system fell from about 70% to about 30% after deliberation. The people of Japan, in microcosm, didn't like the idea of taking responsibility for the investment of their retirement money. They were risk averse. Instead, what they wanted was something absolutely secure, so they were willing actually to pay for an increase in taxes in the consumption tax, which at that point was very low, to increase it, say, from 2.5% to 5%, which was, as I recall, one of the proposals, provided that the money went to shore up the pension system. That's what the government ended up doing. So we created the roadmap for a different solution after the government realized that the high support in the polls didn't mean very much. Very often, public opinion polls of the conventional sort are just the public's impression of sound bites and headlines, and they can be influenced just by a phrase. The Japanese government misleadingly called their privatization the funded system because each person would have his or her own fund, but in fact, people interpreted that as saying, oh, it's a funded system. It's better to have a funded system than a non-funded system. So this was really not a solid basis for the reform. So that's just one case. I'll tell you another case. Let's see which. Another case with civil society in Bulgaria. The Roma went to segregated schools and taught in the Roma language. Schools that didn't even have teachers because the older children were expected to teach the younger children. So we did a deliberative poll about the condition of the Roma, a national one, a big convening in this great hall of the people left over from the communist era. And the sample moved decisively to accept the desegregation of the Roma schools and the busing of the Roma children into schools with everybody else. And that was very surprising to people. And the government accepted it. It was welcomed by the prime minister at the time. And eventually that reform was accomplished. And our Bulgarian partners give us great credit for having catalyzed the change because nobody believed that the public would actually accept that. Here, I'll give you another example. In Mongolia, of all places, Mongolia is a competitive democracy since 1992, and it has a private property market system. It's a capitalism and democracy surrounded by China on the one side and Russia on the other. Small population, about 3 million, but a vast territory about the size of Western Europe. We did a deliberative poll for the city of Ulaanbaatar, which was such a success that the government in Mongolia passed a law requiring deliberative polling before the constitution could be amended. And then they convened with the National Statistical Office, who do the census, the recruitment of a meticulous random sample of the Mongolian people, of about 700 people. And you can see on our website for the Center for Deliberative Democracy, just Google Center for Deliberative Democracy and go to Mongolia. You'll see a picture of the people of Mongolia all in one place, who were gathered under the statue of Genghis Khan in the Parliament building, and they deliberated about a whole series of constitutional proposals. Some went up, some went down. They were fashioned now into an amendment. That amendment has just passed and become by 2/3 of the Parliament, and has become law. So that's an example where the deliberations of the people led all the way to changing the Constitution.
There's going to be a process, and you're part of that process of a deliberative poll here in Chile, ¿no?
Yeah.
It's called Deliberación País. Les recuerdo, estamos conversando con James Fishkin, que es profesor de la Universidad de Stanford y es el director del Centro para la Democracia Deliberativa de esa universidad, y está acá en Chile, invitado por el Congreso Futuro. Tell us about that process. How will it work? Who could participate in that kind of process here in Chile, and what will be the issues that people will be discussing there?
Okay. Well, the issues are issues that come out of the referendum of the municipalities that was held recently.
Okay.
And there were, as you know, there were 11 top issues there, and 2 of them will be the top issues in the process. And we're trying to work out exactly which of them will be live issues or which of them the government may have decided beforehand. But we'll pick 2 of the top issues that are live issues. So I probably shouldn't say which, but they will be. That's where the agenda comes from. Then that agenda will be turned into a whole series of specific policy proposals, let's say to change the healthcare system or whatever the issue is. And those specific policy proposals will be spelled out with pros and cons, arguments for and against, and background. And the people over the weekend, approximately 400, will deliberate in randomly assigned small groups with moderators who are trained not to offer any hint of their own opinion, but simply to ensure a relatively equal participation and a civil discussion with mutual respect as people learn to listen to each other as well as speak their opinions. And so this agenda, they'll move through this agenda of proposals and then clarify and agree on key questions that they want to ask panels of competing experts. Those panels of competing experts will have viewpoints, the whole range of viewpoints on the topic. But none of them will give a speech. They will only answer the people's questions. So the agenda for the weekend will consist of an hour and a half small groups, an hour and a half plenary sessions, another hour and a half small groups, another hour and a half plenary sessions, moving throughout the whole weekend. Previous to their arrival, the people will have taken an elaborate questionnaire about these issues for their, so we'll get their pre-deliberation views. Then at the end of the weekend, before they go home, they will take another questionnaire and we'll see what they think after they've really grappled with the issue and talk to people who obviously disagree with them, because a random sample randomly assigned will be diverse. It will have people who have very different political viewpoints, demographics, ages, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, because to have a really good view of what Chilean people really is thinking, we have to have a representative group of people.
That's right.
That should include even those who are using violence in these days to demonstrate their point of view.
Well, nobody should be permitted to use violence in a deliberative process. That would be against the rules of civil discussion. But the people are recruited as individual voters. Mm-hmm. So everybody on the voter lists should be eligible, provided that they're willing to abide by the rules of the process. And if they don't, then they can't participate.
Yeah, and I know. I mean, during the process, they can't use violence, of course. But that people that is using violence in these days in the streets should be included their opinions, their point of view
In my
should
view,
be
that will be,
included, no?
well, look, I am an academic advisor to this process. As an outsider, I can offer advice. The Tribune Foundation, the senators who comprise from the Futures Congress who have now endorsed the process, the other partners will all make the final decision. But my view is everybody who is willing to participate in a civil substantive discussion in a nonviolent manner should be included. We can't start investigating people's history and saying that they're not eligible. And I think all the viewpoints should be included for those who are willing to participate in a civil manner.
What in this kind of in this option of a democracy, what's the role of government and what's the role of Congress?
Well, the role of we view this. There will be a lot of consultation about the proposals before the process takes place. We view this as a test bed for the key potential proposals. Which ones will the public buy into and which ones will they not buy into after they really become more informed about them? And we hope to rely on an advisory committee that will be very broadly constituted, as well as the Chilean Senate, which will be part of the process. We hope to rely on them for advice about which proposals are worth talking about, and at least as possibilities. And then we hope, and they said yesterday in various ways with the announcement, that they would be prepared to consider the results. And this is very important. The two essential ingredients, the three essential ingredients for this process are a rigorously recruited, stratified random sample that's representative. And we hope to collaborate with the University of Chile for that process. Then the second ingredient is the buy-in of people in the policy process, that they will listen to the results. And we think they even announced that yesterday. And the third is the media, who will pay attention to the results. So I hope you will. And we have other media partners who actually want to help the process in every way possible. And I think they will give it a lot of radiation. And so the essential ingredients for success are there, provided Tribune does a lot of work between now and then to clarify and vet the policy options, to develop briefing materials. There will also be video versions of the briefing materials so that those who are less literate can easily see the issues as well. We've had a lot of success with that before. And we hope that this will amplify, and this will be the centerpiece of a national discussion about what should actually be done for these issues, the two that are at or near the top of the agenda from the municipalities, the referendum from the municipalities. And this will then be a credible version of the considered judgments of the public, the voice of the people, if you will.
Well, it will be a very interesting process, I'm sure, and we'll be giving it a lot of attention, so you can be sure of that too. Mr. James Fishkin, thank you very much for this conversation.
My pleasure.